Welcome to the House Mill on 3 Mill Island, Bromley by Bow. We represent the Riverlea Tidal Mill Trust. I'm Beverly Charters. This is Lee Norman, one of our 52 volunteers, and John Haggerty, our chairman. 3 Mill Island is an artificial island. We believe it was built by Cistercian monks, and it's built on stilts, much like Venice. And Lee has one here. You'll see it's made of wood and it's ironclad. We're currently in the development stage of a restoration project, which will see the machinery here put back into full working order. We're now going to follow the story of the grain throughout the building. The house mill is believed to be the largest in the world. It has 5 floors, each of which have a separate function. So the sack of grain is here. They would have been considerably larger sacks of grain, and the miller would pull this rope to engage the clutch. The water wheel next door is turning around, and the sack goes up through the building. And this is the grain bin floor. All the grain wasn't stored on this floor. Some of it, in fact, came straight through from the floor above down to the floor below where it was dressed. And if you tap this, you can tell that it's an empty chute, whereas this one is a structural support. So from this floor, the grain is gravity fed down to the next floor where it's dressed, and it's done by a series of hoppers or chutes. And this is the smutting and dressing floor. It's where the grain would have been cleaned. And there's many examples here of the various grain chutes which would have transported it from the floor above. There's a lovely wooden chute there, sealing it off, and another one here. And here we have the canvas chutes, which would have brought the grain down. The reason it's called smutting and dressing is because smut is a black sticky fungus which grows on grain, and it's hallucinogenic, so it's extremely important that it's taken off the grain before it's put into the food chain, and particularly here because our mill ground grain for the production of gin rather than flour.
Beverly mentioned to you that this was the smutting floor. The smutting machine would have been here. In the 1950s it was taken away by scrap metal merchants, so we don't have a replica of that. In front of me is where the vertical drive becomes a horizontal drive, and on it you'll see various pulley wheels that would drive the machinery that was here. One there which would drive the sack hoist, which you saw earlier, and there's a rope drive there. This is one of 2 vertical drives, and this is the crown wheel. It's made of metal and the teeth are wood. The reason for that is simple, because in a mill, when the grain is ground, it becomes flour and it becomes an incendiary, and you don't want to spark with metal touching metal. So it uses wooden teeth, and in this case it's apple, and if it breaks, and there are several broken teeth on this, the carpenter could come along and just put a new one in as the wheel is still turning.
This is the pattern store of the house mill, and we understand that there's some 3,000 wooden patterns, and they would have been used to cast in metal at a local foundry all of the working parts of the mill, and we're very lucky to have nearly 3,000 of them, and we're currently having them surveyed to see how many of them that we can use in the restoration project. This in fact is part of the millstone machinery, and it's known as a damsel. And then just here there's a piece of the sluice gate that works the gate, which is situated just in front of the mill wheels. And the very fact that the mill had all its own patterns just serves to illustrate how important it was for the owners and for the Lower Lee Valley, because as each piece broke, they could immediately go to the foundry on the next piece of land and get another one cast, so the downtime for the machinery was minimal.
We're now on the grinding floor. We intend to get these pair of stones working again. We're either going to replace the furniture or replicate it. These came in 1776, the original French stones. We open the hopper, the grain comes down into the centre of the stones. The turning stone is turning. There should be a damsel in there, but it's missing, and it forces the grain out to the edges. And as it goes to the edge, it drops by the side of the stones themselves, and there's a little brush on the top stone that's turning, and it brushes the grain down a hole into the hoppers below. We've come to the journey's end. The grain has come in, it's gone to the top of the building and slowly works its way through it. Immediately above here are the stones that you just saw. The ground grain comes down this chute into the waiting sack. Same flow mechanism as before. As the grain comes in the sack, the miller checks it. If it's too fine or too coarse. If it's too fine or too coarse, you just adjust the gap between the stones on the floor above. When the sack is full, it gets tied off, taken that way out of the building onto the waiting barges. This is the powerhouse. There are 4 wheels here, 2 at this end and 2 at the farther end. Behind me is a wheel, and there's this wheel here, which is the oldest wheel. It's the most inefficient wheel, and it's the only one made of wood. The rest are all made of metal. Now, in front of each wheel, there is a sluice gate. And when the miller wants water to turn his wheel, he opens the sluice gate. And he only rates it about so high. So all it needs, enough power to turn the wheel. Once he wants to stop, if he's ground enough grain, he just turns it back the other way. It's a very simple mechanism, very easy to do. We're now at the gearbox. This is where the horizontal drive converts into the vertical, goes up to the top floor, converts back to the horizontal, which drives all the machinery. Here you'll see the great sperm wheel. There's a bit missing here, which was taken out by scrap metal merchants in the 1950s, 1960s, and we hope to be able to replace all of this. This will work again as a powerhouse on its own.
These are the wheels that were put in to drive the Fairbairn stones. So it's the silent machinery, and unfortunately they have been heavily vandalised, so they are indeed quite silent. It's a much larger wheel, much higher set out of the water, and the buckets or the blades are much more curved, so they would have skimmed through the water much more efficiently, and it would have been more powerful. Again, you've got the sluice gate here with the ship's wheel. But moving on to the last wheel, we have a much larger sluice gate altogether. It's got a handle here and a brake on the side, so you know that what's behind is going to be much more powerful. And this indeed has now become our favourite wheel. It's larger altogether, and it has a span of 20 foot by 8. The wheel's badly damaged because in the 1950s, 60s it was sold or stolen for scrap, and although it is in a state of disrepair, we've had wheelwrights on site. They were here last week, and we understand from them that each of the wheels is fully repairable and they will be done in situ. So we're very privileged. The wheelwrights will be working here over about a year, 15 months, to fix each of the wheels and get them working again.